House in Baltimore, and as the Ravens take a bye week and get ready to play the Cincinnati Bengals, as 4 and 5 football teams do. And maybe it's time to put some focus back on baseball, where there has not been any activity in regard to the Orioles or the offseason or a owner or a managing partner or a general manager or a baseball ops or a field manager or any of those things. This guy is just fresh back from the World Series. I don't know how many he's covered at this point, and I thought it appropriate today that I bust out my Roberto Clemente hat because I like to kid him that he covered Clemente, although I did. It's close. It's not that far off. Barry Bloom joins us here. He is Boom Ski and the longtime contributing national baseball columnist at Forbes, MLB, all sorts of places, and many, many years on the East Coast and now out on the West Coast doing things. We had a nice World Series, right? I mean, L.A. and Boston, Boomski. It was, a long time coming in my lifetime, wondering when the Red Sox and Dodgers would ever get together, right?
Yeah, and just to correct your intro, no, I did not cover Clemente. He preceded me, and this was my 39th World Series.
Dude, you saw Clemente play, though, right? I mean,
yeah, of course, I saw Clemente play. Sure.
Okay, well, I mean, there's fewer of those folks left on the planet. I'm not one of them, right? So, especially being in an American League city, right? You had to be in a place like New York where you would have access to both leagues, right?
Right, and because there was no national television really to speak of at the time, except for seeing those teams come through Shea Stadium. I didn't get to see many of those guys. I mean, I saw Mays, I saw Aaron, I saw Clemente, I saw Koufax pitch, I saw Marichal pitch, but it wasn't, obviously on a regular basis. And that being a Yankee fan, I saw the Yankees a lot more, and I saw Mantle a lot, as a kid.
Barry Bloom can be followed at Boom Ski with a silent E there at the end, out on Twitter. Actually doing a book on the '84 Padres, and I see your picture with Tony Gwynn, and we shared a mutual relationship and a fondness for Tony. And, would Tony Gwynn recognize this version of baseball? I mean, it's fascinating because he might be the exception to the guy that they would never shift on him, right? I mean, but the game has changed dramatically. And I think from the regular season, even into the postseason, and how relievers are used, and now that we get into this offseason, I think if we're Oriole fans, we have to look and say, how much has the game changed and where is the future of the game? Because it's not going back to where it was 30 years ago.
Well, I think the game has changed dramatically in the last 3 years. I mean, if you go back now to even 2 years ago when Bumgarner pitched his second complete game shutout in a wild card game, you didn't have a complete game in this entire postseason this year. And Kershaw against Atlanta, when Game 2 of the NLDS was really the closest, and Davey Roberts pulled him out before he got a chance to even start the ninth inning. So, in all different phases of the game, Gwynn certainly wouldn't recognize the game, and I could just hear him railing about it, and railing about the metrics, and railing about the situation with the shift. But sure, certainly, he was one of those guys like Votto is today, where if you give him a hole, he'd take whatever hole you gave him. So it would have been impossible to shift on him.
Well, I think Wade Boggs, the best hitters, would have been like that. And then we see where we are in Baltimore. Barry, I don't need to tell you 115 losses. I mean, there's an iconic shot that came out of Fenway Park, in front of the wall where the standings sit at, 47 and 115. That's going to hang there for a long time, but it does wash away next year and things can get better. I mean, you're pretty plugged in with Major League Baseball. At one point, you were employed by them, but you've been around the game a long, long time. Certainly, you've watched this Angelos thing, and you're one of those guys that wrote about this 20, 25 years ago when it was going on. This thing's deteriorated to the point where I don't recognize it, and I think my community doesn't recognize it, and now we're, a week out on the World Series being over, and there doesn't even feel like there's any intention here to sort of clarify some sort of strategy as to what the worst team in Major League Baseball is going to do for its customers, for its fan base here.
Well, I'm driving across the desert today to get to San Diego for the general managers meetings this week over in La Costa. And I think, to your point, it's fully noted that the Orioles are the one team in Major League Baseball who are going into these meetings that don't even have a general manager or manager yet. And the question is, who's even running the entire organization? They cut a lot of their scouts, a lot of the people in the front office. It's almost like they're running on zero energy at this point. So to point in what direction they're going to go to and what kind of money they're going to invest in the product, I mean, they really have to determine, who among the Angelos family is going to be running the thing and how much money they're going to invest in it or just sell it at this point.
How outlandish is that in your experience of 39 World Series? I mean, look, we use words around here like unorthodox and unique and, all of these things to talk about how the Orioles are run. The word's probably poorly. They're run poorly. And the notion around the industry that someone in the industry, whether it's Kim Ng or Ben Cherington or whomever it might be, would opt for this situation. I remember Joe Girardi laughing at them. Literally, Bobby Valentine laughed at them before he got laughed out of Boston. But this is not a situation where the LaRussas and the Tories and the senior advisors ever wanted to come. And with Brady Anderson in this mix and the stories that are now sort of infamous inside the industry as to how this thing has gone the last couple of years with Buck Showalter and Dan Duquette not even communicating, the mere fact that they're going to go to GM meetings without a GM this week probably speaks volumes about why you don't want that gig, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, there's always going to be somebody out there who's going to fool themselves, and there's only 30 of these jobs, and somebody, once they decide to hire somebody, is going to take that gig. I mean, that's going to happen. Who and at what level? It could be another old-timer. Remember, they took Duquette off the scrap heap. He hadn't been a general manager in something like 10 years before they brought him back. And, yes, even though Duquette and Buck were never a good mix, it wasn't a great marriage to begin with. For a number of years, Duquette did put together a good product. Buck did take the players that he gave him, and they were very competitive. They won division titles together, and it's just that, particularly with the pitching staff the way it went, you reached a breaking point a couple of years ago at midseason where between injuries and lack of interest to go out and get another pitcher or a couple to sustain the staff, that's where it really started to fall apart. And that's where the relationship really began to fall apart, because you can hear Buck pleading with the front office to get him pieces that he needed to put him over the top, and the front office not being able to do it, and Duquette being the guy who was the point man, who was being limited on what he could do and how much money he could spend. And then, they tried. So it's like, are they as bad run as some teams I've seen? I mean, the Tigers lost in the hundred and teens with Alan Trammell as manager before they converted over. The Padres have had right now. I think they're going on 2007. They've had no playoffs since 2006. A play-in game in 2007. They were eliminated on the last day of the season in 2010. And that's the only better than 500 season they've had since 2007. And really, they fired Bud Black 2 years ago in June, and they're 88 games under 500 since then. So, I mean, even though you're mired in Baltimore, there are multiple organizations in Major League Baseball right now who are like this and are poorly run and are doing the same thing.
And have had it worse. I mean, I talked to the Mariners fans, and there's plenty of places, but Tampa Bay's picked it back up. And Barry, it certainly helps to have money, as a big part of this thing. But I would love for you to speak to Buck and Duquette and their departure and what that signifies here, right? After 115 losses, Buck's never going to manage again in the big leagues, right? And Duquette remains to be seen where he's going to be hired after this mess, right?
Yeah, I mean, just by their nature of their age, the amount of money they made, all these guys, Buck is in a class of manager like Scioscia and Girardi and Baker. And, these guys are not going to manage again the way baseball is going. I mean, in most places, manager is considered a middle management guy, basically being dictated to by baseball ops. I watched 3 teams deteriorate this season with that way of doing things based on their analytics and a movable way of approaching things. No matter what happened, they'd stick to their analytics and do the same thing over and over again to their detriment. And I'll point out 3. The Diamondbacks, as they fell apart in September, they kept going to the same guys in the bullpen over and over again who were gassed, and they kept losing games. You had the Yankees in a division series against the against the Red Sox. They were going to be outclassed, I think, by the Red Sox anyway. Although you did have a series that was 1-1. The Yankees could have won Game 1. They beat them pretty well in Game 2, and then they collapsed at the stadium. And in those 2 games, you had Aaron Boone go too long with Severino one day, who got the hell beaten out of him while he was still out on the mound, and then did the same thing the next day with CC Sabathia, and games were out of reach before he went to the bullpen. And then in the World Series, you had the Dodgers where, for the second year in a row, they pulled Rich Hill out of the game too early, and it cost them that game and ultimately the series. And then in the last 2 games, you had Kenley Jansen being put in the 8th inning to let up a game-tying home run in Game 4, and then go back to the well again in the 8th inning of Game 5 and do the same thing.
Well, it feels like a blackjack manual, right? It feels like you're there, and what you hit on 17 or stick on 16 or whatever the book tells you to do. That's where baseball is at this point. And
it's not even the book. The book is thrown out the window. This is now just based on, this is what the numbers and the metrics tell you, and it doesn't take into consideration, the heart medicine that Kenley Jansen is on, how gassed he has been really since he came back from missing a period of time on the disabled list with the heart issue. And it's like what works in June over a 162 game season, when you have the ups and downs of the season, it doesn't work in September and doesn't work in a short series, and you have to make the adjustment, and none of these teams have a plan B.
Barry Bloom is our guest. He is Boomski. We're discussing the Orioles' woes and sort of mixing and matching some offseason here as the general managers' meetings happen. And the Orioles, there's no news, there's no movement, but certainly the one thing that won't be moved is Chris Davis, right? And the notion that this organization is saddled with this sort of a contract right now, and you mentioned analytics and shifting, and this is a great, great example, perhaps the first great example of a guy literally having his career altered in such a unique way by this period of baseball and how they've adjusted to him. And it's over. It's in his head, it's in his ears, it's in his swing, it's everywhere. He's no longer a Major League Baseball player, and the organization owes him over $100 million.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing with the Yankees and Jacoby Ellsbury. I mean, he doesn't seem like he wants to play anymore, and he's always injured, and he missed a whole season. And the Yankees still have, millions of dollars owed out to him. There's a lot of these contracts in baseball. Chris Davis just stands out because of the season he had, and with the what did he bat, $150? I mean, that played pretty regularly. They ran him out there every day. $20 million, Buck was going to put him on the field. And so, it was glaring in the fact that he couldn't perform under the circumstances. But that's been a long time coming with Chris Davis, too. It wasn't just this year.
All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute, Owings Mills. Dr. Kevin Crutchfield, as well as Dr. Craig Bennett, will be joining us on a week-by-week basis. They are the new game plan for sports-related injuries. If you're out in Owings Mills, anywhere near the Foundry, if you've seen Cal Ripken on the billboards, we're going to be introducing the doctors and telling their story about this incredible world-class care you're getting right out in Owings Mills. It is the LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute at Foundry Row. Also, our friends at Patrick's in Essex, my old stopping grounds right on East Eastern Avenue, the cold beer, the great bands, never recover. Salads, sandwiches, and the pub grub, and the games are always on. Steak dinner on Thursday night, just $11.99. Tacos on Monday, shrimp on Tuesday, wings on Wednesday, and, of course, the Johnny Unitas Wall in the back on the left side. That is the west side of Patrick's in Essex. See you over on Eastern Avenue in Essex. We're going to be bringing a Ravens player to Patrick's in Essex very, very soon. We'll be telling you more about that. Barry Bloom is our guest. He is Boom Ski out on the Twitter thing, as well as at Forbes. Look, I know you worked at MLB, and you've worked in and around, and the commissionership going back to, Fay Vincent and my goodness, back to Bowie Kuhn for all I know. But the Manfred situation, as it relates to the Orioles, as it relates to Angelos, as it relates to all the Masson money that's in dispute and the Lerner family and where all this is, does Rob Manfred... Is there a point where Major League Baseball would get involved with a franchise? I often use the McDonald's, right? Like, if your McDonald's has rats and no running water and the bathrooms aren't clean and the health department has come in, they come and take your franchise away, right? Whatever that franchise is. At what point does Major League Baseball say no one's running this place? As it feels like they've been reporting all year to a whole bunch of reporters like yourself that have been around baseball a long time and understand this. I mean, at what point would Manfred get involved?
It would take, quite a bit of really issues for Major League Baseball to get involved in these things. Number one, they don't want to get involved, and you can't take away a franchise from somebody who doesn't want to give it up, regardless of how you run it. It's your franchise. That's number one. Number two, they did this already with the Montreal Expos when they sold the team to Washington, and they wound up. Major League Baseball wound up originally when they did this. It was with the idea that they'd hold the team for 2 seasons, and it went on something like 4 or 5 before they finally moved it and divested it to the Lerners. So it's a process. I know that, look, Major League Baseball is all run by lawyers at this point. They're very adept at what they do. I'm sure the internals with the Orioles are being discussed all the time. And then the major issue just becomes, since Baltimore is not a top 10 market, then they're eligible for revenue sharing, and the other owners, if the Orioles are not putting effort into being competitive, the other owners get upset that they're sinking their revenue sharing money into a sinking ship. So there's a lot of complications about it, but until Angelo says that no mas, he's going to have to figure it out. It's his asset. And baseball teams are worth a lot of money. And even in its current state, if the Orioles are put on the market, they're going to generate $1 billion. So there's no need for Manfred to get involved.
Speaking of all of the money involved in all of this, the Manny Machado thing certainly has played out in an interesting storyline this year, right? Like, from where we were in the offseason of, will they deal him? Will the Orioles compete? They clearly weren't going to compete. Then it was, is he going to be a Yankee? Is he going to be a Philly, a Reds, wherever it was going to be? He has become an interesting poster boy in the game. And look, you go back to the Bronx Zoo and Reggie Jackson, he's a well-disliked character in Major League Baseball. He's a heel now, isn't he?
Please don't, put Manny in the same situation or, in the same breath as Reggie. I mean, no matter what, a negative or positive catalyst Reggie was, they gave him his nickname, Buck, for a reason. When you threw the money on the field, he was there. And his postseason record, he's not called Mr. October for postseason for nothing. Machado disappeared in the World Series. I was just looking at the numbers yesterday. He was like 4 for 22 without an extra base hit. And he was the center of more controversy for somebody who wasn't involved in a positive nature in any game than anybody I've seen. But, saying that he's going to go out and get a load of money from somebody because he's so talented, and they're going to hope that they're going to be able to rein him in and make him play up to his potential.
Well, and then there's the, I'm not Johnny Hustle. I mean, I don't know in what line of work you go on a job interview and say, I might not give you 100% whenever it feels like I'm not in the mood to give you 100. It's really an incredible portrait he painted for himself, right?
And you're not sure whether he said it to deep the Red Sox because if it was in their head that Machado wasn't going to hustle, and he did hustle, it would be a completely different situation. But I watched him. I was at all the games at Dodger Stadium, and he looks out of shape. For a guy with his ability, really, he doesn't get down the line. There are ground balls he should beat out. Even when he runs hard, he doesn't beat them out. And, then you have the situation where he lines a ball off the wall and admires it and thinks it's a home run, and he's cruising around first base and has to hold for a single when, he could have been at second base for a double, and that just punctuates the image that he doesn't hustle. But still, in all that, he's such a good shortstop, and he has such an arm, and he does have the ability to perform. He's still going to get the money.
He is Barry Bloom. He is Boomski. He has been my friend for a long time. You can find him out on Twitter at Boomski and at Forbes, where he covers Major League Baseball. Where is the action on him and Harper and the rumors that perhaps I'll be able to take an 87-mile drive up 95 and have a cheesesteak and a roast pork and, whatever else they're enjoying up in Philly. And Machado and Harper could be some sort of a package deal. That would make for a fascinating offseason for the Phillies, for the National League, for the East Coast, and certainly it feels like their ownership is very, very emboldened to make high bids, right?
I think the Phillies have a lot of space. They've got a lot of salary space to be able to sign. They could sign both of these players. I've been saying that since the middle of the season. And I think they will make a run at both of them. And I think really with Machado, you're looking at him going to the highest bidder, whoever gives him the most money. Could be the Yankees, could be the Cubs, could be the Phillies. I think that's the realm of teams that would be interested in him right now. All teams, those teams could use that, and they could use him to be plugged in at shortstop. Particularly the Cubs with Addison Russell being phased out, and the Yankees with having Didi Gregorius after the season pretty much, after Tommy John surgery on his throwing elbow. So, they both fill needs. It's just a matter of what they're going to do with the agent and what Machado's going to say. As far as Harper's concerned, I still believe that he wants to come out west. He's a Las Vegas kid. I think the Dodgers, Giants, Angels, even the Padres, to a lesser extent, are landing places for him. I don't really believe he's going to wind up going to the Phillies and put himself in a situation where, you had a team that faded on September 1st and still they have a great pitching staff, a great young staff, but they're still in the building stage. I think Harper's going to want to go to a team that is a little bit further down the road than the building stage. And the Dodgers would probably be a perfect place for him because you have Seager coming back from his Tommy John surgery, and that eliminates the need for Machado. But the Dodgers could use Harper in the outfield. You're basically looking at it and saying, hey, give me Puig, Harper, and Bellinger in the outfield, and let's go. I think it would be a great thing for the Dodgers. But I'm not so sure, where Harper's going to land. But I'm not sure it's going to be, even though his agent is Scott Burrows, I'm not sure the highest bidder is going to be the thing for him.
Last thing for you, Barry, before I let you go, the Red Sox winning, we've talked about everything but them, quite frankly. They were really a legendarily good team who sort of buzzsawed through the postseason. They've won so much now. Every couple of years they win, so it's almost boring in the curse of the Bambino and all the things that we spent large stretches of time in the aftermath of Bill Buckner thinking about and writing about and talking about. At least I did the first 15 years of my radio career. But this was the best Red Sox team ever, right? I mean, for all of the bloody sock and Pedro and all the Ortiz and stuff, they sort of ran away and hid in some sort of quiet way right out in plain daylight, right?
Well, obviously, if you look at the record, just by the numbers, they won 108 during the regular season, 119 if you include the playoffs. They were 11-2 in the playoffs. They just ran through the season, but I think you qualify that by the fact that you had, within their own division, they mopped up on the Orioles, Tampa Bay, and Toronto all season. And then you go into the rest of the league. You had four terrible teams in the AL Central and a pretty strong AL West. There was only really one bottom feeder in the AL West, but you're playing most of your games against those teams, and it fattens up the record. I'm sorry. So I've had this discussion. By record-wise, obviously, I'd put them up into the top 5 teams in history, but I'm not sure they're better than the 2004 Red Sox team. I mean, the 2004 Red Sox team, had, in the end, they'll wind up with at least 2 Hall of Famers on it. You're going to have Pedro already. You'll have Poppy, probably. You had Schilling on that team. You had Manny on that team. I mean, that was really a team. You looked at the lineup. Their catcher was much better. I mean, Veritek was a great catcher. He was captain of the team, and he was a good hitting catcher. The one thing you look at the Red Sox, the bottom of their lineup is not much better than the Diamondbacks. They had Bradley with a terrible season. They had De Leon Vasquez who couldn't hit behind the plate, and there you could go. Yankees, I think, had a much more solid lineup going around than the Red Sox did. But Cora got more out of this Red Sox team than anybody, I think, could have. I think, for the $800,000 that they paid Cora, I think that they got more than their money's worth. They should give this guy a raise. He's got a couple more years to go on his contract, and he's really, as a rookie manager, he was hardly a rookie manager. The stuff he did with that team and the edge that he gave that team and the ability to steal signs, read pitchers, they're the bridge to the next era when you look at them. Because the thing that most impressed me is that they're a good situational hitting team. They'll take what we talked about with Tony Gwynn and the shift. I watched them scissor up the Yankee and Dodger defense in both the early round of the playoffs and the World Series. Ultimately, if you give them a hole, they'll take a base hit and they'll put it there. They're very Bill Jamish in a way that they don't want to bunt. They don't want to intentionally walk anybody with a runner on second base. Cora did that twice in the World Series with Puig at the plate, got burned both times. But that's kind of their ethos. And then the other thing about it is that they give him the numbers and the analytics, but Dombrowski's an old-school general manager, and he doesn't interfere with Cora about managing a game. If Cora looks at the analytics and says, you know what, I'm going to go with a couple of my left-handed batters like he did against Kershaw in Game 5 of the World Series, because to me that gives us a better chance to win. Forget what the analytics has to say. He has that freedom to do it, and if he makes a mistake, which he did in the World Series, he'd say, yeah, that was my call, and I made a mistake on it, and, you move on. And I think that's where baseball is going to go. Everything comes back. Everything has an equal and opposite reaction. And the highly analytic teams that we talked about that didn't adjust are going to start adjusting because of the copycat nature of baseball. Everybody's going to look at this and say, Boston was far and away the best team in baseball, and really they didn't have the best talent from 1 to 25 in their roster. But they utilized their players as a team better than any team in the major leagues. And that's why they were as successful as they were in an era where the major leagues are full of teams like the Orioles who are basically starting spring training and saying, we're out of it, we're rebuilding, we're going for draft choices, and the fans are responding to it. If you look at the attendance figures for this year, there's an inverse reaction to what these teams in these markets are doing. The Orioles dropped more than 300,000 in attendance this year because after a while, people were just not going to come out to see the games and pay major league prices for a minor league product. The same thing happened in Miami. You know, Tampa was better, but they were never really, even though they won 90 games, they were really never competitive in their own division. They finished like 18 games out, maybe more. You know, they played most of the second half of the season was when they played well. And games that mean nothing to me in terms of what you see in a team. Let's see what happens when the season starts next year. And I ran into a friend of mine at the Fall League the other day who's a scout for them, and he said the owners have given them a payroll of $30 million to work with. And you can't exist in Major League Baseball these days like that. And here's the thing. For teams like the Orioles and the Rays, there really isn't any excuse because you get $100 million off the top, everybody, for your national television money. So that's your seed money, and that should be the baseline of your payroll. There's no excuse for anybody going below that. And then on top of it, you're going to wind up, if you're in a lower local revenue, you're going to wind up with 20 to 30 million from revenue share. So that's 130 million off the top to play with. You don't have any excuse not to try to be competitive this year.
Barry, we're losing you, man. It's always a pleasure. He made it through 7 hours and 20 minutes of Game 3, and he would have done it again the next night. From Fenway Park and the Fenway Franks to Dodger Dogs in Dodger Stadium, Barry Bloom is Boomski. That's with a silent E, Boomskie, out on Twitter. No one covers Major League Baseball with more passion and has for a 39 World Series in his book on the 84 Padres, which I'm surely going to read and promote and talk about. You can find Boomski out at Forbes.com as well. You can find me out in the buy at Toyota.com Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Our morning newspaper ships digitally each and every morning at 7 a.m., all courtesy of our friends at Planet Fitness. $5 down, $10 a month. That's the way they do it at Planet Fitness at PlanetFitness.com, as well as our friends at Laurel Park, where they are racing this weekend, and the sports bar is open. The college football's on. The crab cakes are delicious, and the vibe's awesome. Get on down to Laurel Park. If you haven't been there lately, you haven't been at all. See all the improvements that they have made. I am improving out on the internet. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.